Hey guys, Sko here, and in this video we are going to be looking at Protection Warriors in World of Warcraft's upcoming expansion, BFA. As you guys probably know, I've been playing a Protection Warrior every expansion ever since Vanilla, with only a brief swap over to Guardian Druid most recently in Legion, when Blizzard basically made large changes to the Protection Warrior class, basically crippling it when it came to its use in hardcore progress raiding. I think the tank community as a whole can agree that Protection Warrior throughout Legion, other than the one-day Emerald Nightmare progress, was pretty far behind other tanks in terms of both raiding and obviously Mythic Plus as well. And Blizzard were very aware of this, at least you would hope so. With that being said, I, like many others, was very excited to see how Blizzard was going to address these issues with Protection Warrior in BFA, and looked forward to getting my hands on the class when the Alpha and Beta came around. However, it ended up being that Protection Warrior was one of the last classes to receive its class changes, with certain talents not being implemented until just over a week ago. So now that Blizzard have stated that the majority of class changes have been completed and everything seems to be implemented with Protection Warrior, let's take a look at the class as it is. Firstly, let's take a look at what's changed base ability wise. Battlecry has been replaced with Avatar, which is a nice addition, as alongside being a damage cooldown, Avatar also removes roots and snares alongside generating 20 rage, so it gives it an additional use there. Intimidating Shout is back. I mean, I can't remember the last time that we had Intimidating Shout as a Protection Warrior, but I think everyone knows what it does. Shockwave is now a base talent, so we don't need to spend a point on it. Vanguard is the new defensive passive that increases our stamina percentage for being protection spec'd. Although in BFA, this passive is also going to increase our armor based on strength, and this is a theme consistent with tanks across the board in BFA. Utility-wise, Inspiring Presence has been removed, which was a strong passive utility for Protection Warriors on certain raid encounters that had consistent raid damage. I can remember that we as a guild, for example Method, were strongly considering bringing a Protection Warrior for Fallen Avatar Phase 2, primarily just for, you know, the Inspiring Presence. It was pretty much at this point, guys, that the only reason you'd bring a Protection Warrior into raids was, you know, for Inspiring Presence potentially to help the healers. But Inspiring Presence at this point, guys, in BFA has been replaced with Rallying Cry, which is a decent raid cooldown and definitely a welcome addition. Warriors have also been given Battle Shout, which covers off the 10% strength and agility increase raid buff. Oh, and we also no longer have the artifact ability, but let's face it, guys, who is going to miss that garbage? There's been a bunch of ability changes that have been made as well in BFA. Demo Shout is now on a sweet 45-second cooldown, which is great, but it is now in the GCD. Shield Block has its recharge time increased quite significantly, and this is obviously a change in a bad way. Spell Reflect now only reduces 15% magic damage rather than the 50% that it was at in Legion. And this might seem like a huge drop at first, but again, it is following a theme that's consistent with tanks across the board, that magic damage is just not meant to be as, you know, heavily mitigated as it was before. The slow effect from Thunderclap is not as significant as before either, which will potentially make kiting mobs a little bit harder. This is maybe like a more Mythic Plus kind of change, and this goes hand in hand with the general change in BFA that tanks are generating less threat than they did in Legion. So I think Blizzard, you know, is trying to make it a little bit harder to kite large packs of mobs in Mythic Plus potentially. We will see. Ignore Pain now scales with attack power a lot less than before though, a whole lot less. This is most likely again in regards to not making it too strong against potential magic damage. Blizzard don't want to give Warriors too much of an edge over other tanks. And this is huge, guys, but Ignore Pain is now also on GCD, which takes a lot of getting used to. Finally, there's been a significant change to our Mastery, Critical Block. This is because, long story short, a block now kind of only functions as an armor increase while active. So a Critical Block basically doubles that armor increase. This again is a move to basically bring Warriors' active mitigation into kind of line with other tanks' active mitigation right now. In that active mitigation in BFA is simply an armor increase that reduces physical damage. So looking at the talent tree now, there's a lot of familiar faces, but with a few changes and additions that I'm definitely quite happy about. Firstly, it's great to see Into the Fray on the first talent line, and even better that the haste bonus now also applies along, you know, if you got allies close to you as well as enemies. This is going to make it so much easier to actually stack it up, especially in, you know, even in raiding scenarios. And as you guys know, haste has been critically important to Warriors in the past in terms of increasing shield block uptime, and the same will likely be true again. The other interesting option on this first line is Punish, which is a new ability. This reduces the incoming damage, it reduces the damage of the enemy that the enemy does to you by 3%, and also increases your shield slam damage by 20%. So it's also a very interesting talent. The second line of talents are all talents you're familiar with, but they've been reshuffled slightly. There's nothing really interesting to say about them. The third line of talents sees the addition of Unstoppable Force. Now this is kind of like the default go-to talent for raiding. It's both a damage and survivability increase. The talent reduces the cooldown of Thunderclap by 50% when Avatar is active, which basically means more Thunderclaps, which generates more rage on its own. However, Thunderclap can also reset Shield Slam, which again provides more rage. The other talent on this line, Dragon Roar, is actually the talent that took Blizzard ages to implement. The space it occupies had been blank for so long, and so everyone was quite excited to see what they were going to put there. And that was, you know, going to be the brand new ability for BFA. But it turns out that it ended up being nothing new, and it was just a 50% slow ability that might get some limited use in Mythic Plus. It's definitely a feels bad, man. The fourth line of talents is what made me actually the happiest to see, well, at least at first. Ever since Blizzard made the big changes to Protection Warrior and Legion, somewhere after Emerald Nightmare and I think Trial of Valor, I've been providing feedback and saying in multiple tank videos that Devastator cannot be on the same line as Indomitable. For Warrior to even be close, even be a close contender in Legion, both Devastator and Indomitable would need to be selected, and that's obviously not possible when Blizzard put them on the same line. That being said, my happiness was somewhat short-lived when I saw this change, as there's actually been changes to Indomitable. Instead of increasing HP and Ignore Pain by both 20%, it now only increases your HP by 10%, which is obviously a big change from Legion. Funnily enough, the new talent that's on this line that replaced Devastate, called Bolster, reduces last stand cooldown by 60 seconds and causes you to block all attacks for the duration of last stand, is now by far the strongest talent on this line, in my opinion. It's basically like a Demon Hunter Metamorphosis on a shorter cooldown. Maybe in the next expansion, guys, we'll get to pick Indomitable, but as of now, it's looking like Bolster all the way. The fifth talent line is the Crowd Control tier. The reduced cooldown on Shockwave, if you strike at least 3 targets, is now a talent that you must pick if you want it. Or alternatively, you can take Stormbolt to also give yourself a nice single target stun. Moving on to the sixth line of talents. This is actually an interesting one, and it's got choices that you're going to need to think about a little bit. Devastator is now on this line. However, Devastator is not going to function as strongly as it did in Legion. For starters, the 5 rage gain per hit has now been removed from the talent, which is pretty big. And secondly, warrior play in BFA is not as fast paced as it was in Legion. The rage generation is lower, meaning that you need to be more selective with your GCDs, and you might actually find windows to use Devastate as an ability to fill in gaps. Vengeance is in a somewhat similar boat. The strength of Vengeance is tied to rage generation, and assuming that you can continuously cycle through Revenge and Ignore Pain while also maintaining your active mitigation, then it's great. However, with BFA single target rage generation as it is in my experience, I'm not convinced that you will always be able to spend rage on Revenge to keep a good Vengeance rotation up without sacrificing active mitigation. That being said, when tanking multiple mobs, both Devastator and Vengeance become strong choices, as rage is more plentiful alongside more revenge procs, which means you have less GCDs to actually spend on the Devastate ability. Which, yeah, leaves Booming Voice, the last talent on this line, to talk about. It's been nerfed a bit from live. The damage and the rage have both been nerfed a little bit, but it still functions the same. It still gives you an increase in damage and gives you extra rage when Damage Shout is used. And in the current climate, considering what I just said about Vengeance and Devastator, I do think that it would probably be my go-to talent for single target raiding at the moment. The final talent line for Warrior is something that you're very familiar with, guys. It comes down to a choice between Anger Management and Heavy Repercussions, and both are viable options. The rage generation in BFA being lower is an argument obviously against Anger Management, as it won't have as significant an impact as it did before. However, by choosing Booming Voice on the talent line before, and with Demo Shout only having a 45-second cooldown in BFA, there are definitely strong arguments for Anger Management. This is actually bolstered, excuse the pun, when the bolster talent is taken on talent line 4, because Last Stand becomes such an incredibly strong cooldown, and with an even higher uptime than before. All in all, if I had to select a talent build for raiding right now in BFA, I would probably start with something like this. Moving into how Protection Warrior plays it in BFA, it's actually very similar to Legion, but slower. If we look at Rage Generation in Battle for Azeroth, which is an important topic, you now generate a set amount of rage from each auto attack you do. Typically this is 2 rage using a standard weapon speed, and then 3 rage for taking damage from a melee attack, which, important to note, can only occur once every second. Outside of this, you have the standard rage generating abilities that you're already used to. 15 rage from Shield Slam, 15 rage from Intercept, and 5 rage from Thunderclap. As a side note, you do also generate 20 rage from Avatar, like we mentioned, and 40 rage from Demo Shout if the Booming Voice talent has been selected. However, these are obviously longer cooldown spells. The way rage is generated in Battle for Azeroth will therefore be quite a bit more consistent throughout the expansion, as it is no longer scaling from damage taken, as was the case in Legion. My initial impression on the new rage generation for BFA is generally positive. As a progress raider, I do like consistency, and it should make ability rotations a bit more set. That being said, however, there are quite significant differences in rage being generated single target versus multiple target. On single target, you're only generating 3 rage when melee hit, and if you dodge or parry that hit, you generate no rage. Keeping in mind that enemy swing timers are normally 2 seconds, you'll notice, or around 2 seconds, you will notice that the trickle in of rage from taking damage is actually pretty slow. So the opposite of this, if you're tanking several enemy mobs, you are always going to get guaranteed pretty much the floor of 3 rage per second from being melee attacked. Therefore, when tanking multiple mobs, you're able to spend more rage on revenge for damage or ignore pain for defense. Talking about spending rage, our abilities are similar to Legion. We've got 30 rage for shield block, 30 rage for revenge, and 40 rage for ignore pain. The change you can note is that ignore pain is now a static 40 rage, rather than the previous variable 20 to 60 rage option that would impact the size of your absorb. I'm not really a huge fan of this change, and currently you will sometimes find yourself hovering around kind of a low rage that you kind of have nothing to do with, nothing to spend on. Whether rage generation is at a satisfactory place balance wise or not at the moment is hard to determine, but in my experience so far, it feels a bit low on single target. However, tweaks that need to be made should be relatively easy for Blizzard to do, and just even like a tiny little tweak that they could do to help single target rage generation right now, by a small margin, would be to allow rage to be generated on dodge and parries. It is definitely the single target rage generation that is of most concern right now, as it seems to be at a level a lot lower than what it was in Legion, or what we're used to in Legion. Warrior starts with a decent amount of damage reduction from armor in comparison to other tank classes. And from some quick checks at level 110, the physical damage reduction with shield block up was higher than that of a Battle for Azeroth Guardian Druid with 2 stacks of Ironfor present. But then I guess we would hope so, as shield block now is an extended recharge time, and we know that Druid can keep its active mitigation up 100% of the time while tanking, even in BFA. In summary, I like a lot of the Protection Warrior changes to talents and abilities, and I want to be optimistic about its place among tanks in BFA. However, I definitely have some concerns. The extended recharge time on shield block, especially for hardcore progress rating, where you want to smooth damage as much as possible, could be a little bit rough, and I'm hoping that the gaps won't leave Warrior feeling too vulnerable. I'm also concerned that the rage generation on single target is perhaps a little bit too low. Both of these concerns are hard to verify and address without doing some mythic dungeon bosses or further raid testing, but now that I have my Warrior at level 120, I will definitely do some of that. My final issue with Warrior right now is that ignore pain being on GCD feels really bad, and the way that the Warrior plays, it just doesn't feel right having to use a global cooldown on it, especially for the current values associated to it. Without taking the Devastator talent, I feel like Warriors have enough to occupy their globals, and adding ignore pain in there just feels wrong and really unsatisfying. I mean, that's my thoughts, guys. Let me know how you guys currently feel about Protection Warrior and where you see it ending up in the tank meta for progress rating in the comments below. I'm going to be trying to do one of these videos for each tank class before finishing with an overall summary, and hopefully at that point as well a ranking video at the end. So make sure you subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on if you want to catch those videos. But until then, have a great day and see you on stream.